pass your classes in high school, you can get into a four-year college. Can I see, raise your hands for true? Okay, raise your hands for false. Okay, so it's a matter of interpretation. The average four-year school wants to see a GPA of 85 or above, right, throughout all 4 years of high school. Do we see students last year with 78, 79s getting into four-year schools? Absolutely. There are certainly institutions that will take them. But do we also see seniors with GPAs of 78, 79 who have only four-year schools and no community colleges on their list, and we have to have that conversation of, listen, this GPA is not super four-year college ready? Yeah, we do have to have that conversation a lot. And the more selective the institution, obviously, the higher their desired GPA. At the really highly selective institutions, we're aiming for 95s and up, okay? This isn't meant to like start causing massive stress amongst ninth graders of being like, oh my gosh, a 93 versus a 95. This is more so to say, you're starting your GPA this semester, don't start off on the wrong foot, and by wrong foot, I mean D's, C's, so on and so forth, okay? But don't beat yourself up either. True or false, colleges only care about GPA and test scores. Can I see raise of hands for true? And raise of hands for false. Oh, good. Believe it or not, there are tons of students, especially here at Tech, that think that numbers are all that matters. This is not true. So we know that colleges care about student writing skills, teacher letters of rec, guidance letters of rec, extracurriculars, interpersonal skills, and just myriad other things, which we'll get into. Last one. Graduating high school with the minimum New York State requirements will prepare me for college. Can I see raise of hand for true? Okay, and raise of hand for false? Yeah, so most competitive schools want to see at least 4 years of study of all your core subjects, or at minimum rigorous courses during your junior and senior year. Other New York City high schools, if you have friends that attend different high schools, you can get a Regents diploma, for instance, with only 3 years of math and science, right? But that it would not have you set up for really competitive four-year school admission. And here at Tech, you have a major selection system, right? You'll start thinking about that in about a year and some change, to really make sure that you have rigorous classes that you're interested in junior and senior year. All right, so we're gonna go through the diploma types at Brooklyn Tech really fast. It's way too much information to internalize. Many of you are coming in with Regents exams from middle school, so some of this stuff you might already be checking off, right? The majority of students here at Tech do get an advanced Regents diploma. That's the most common type of state diploma that students receive. But just keep in mind, you need to pass the Regents exams outlined above to get that diploma. These three designations, Mastery in Math, Mastery in Science, Designation of Honors, again, don't beat yourself up over trying to get these things, but just to let you know they exist. If you're getting the advanced Regents plus these different sort of benchmark scores, you can get those advanced designations on your diploma, okay? One thing I want to point out is that in order to be on track to graduate, just with any type of diploma, students need 8 semesters of English, history, and PE. So sometimes students will think if they failed the PE class, for instance, they wouldn't be off track to graduate. They will be. It's just New York State. It's not Brooklyn Tech, right? They need those credits. In terms of the Brooklyn Tech diploma, what this school wants, in addition to fulfilling your advanced Regents requirements, not necessarily the ones with mastery or honors designation, is to pass 2 semesters of DDP, which you're all in the midst of right now, 2 semesters of AP Comp Sci, Chem, Physics, and then community service, extracurricular activities, so on and so forth. So again, no need to memorize this, but just to sort of be aware of the different requirements. All right, so in terms of where did students end up, if we look at cohort 2017 and 2018, you'll see the vast majority of students at this school attended four-year colleges both years, right? Talking like 98, 99% of students attending institutions that grant bachelor's degrees, not associate's degrees. Well, you'll also see though that the vast majority of those students are going to New York public schools, meaning schools within the CUNY and SUNY systems, which we'll talk about in just a minute. With about 20%, give or take, out-of-state public schools, places like Rutgers, Penn State, right? The SUNY equivalent, but in a neighboring state. And private schools. And we don't break out here New York State private schools versus anywhere else. Now that you all have access to Naviance, which I'm going to get into in a little bit, you have access to local acceptance rates, matriculation data for all colleges that Brooklyn Tech students have applied to over the past 5 years. So if you've heard of RIT and you're interested in it, you can look it up on Naviance, find out how many people applied last year, how many got in, what was the average test score GPA range of people that got in, and how many actually ended up going. You have access to all of that now. It's not publicly shared information. You only have access to it as a Brooklyn Tech registered student. So how do we encourage students to pick their colleges and start forming their lists? We are asking students to focus on academic fit, so something that feels appropriately challenging for them and has their major or minors of interest. A financial fit, meaning we want it to be affordably priced. We want minimal family contribution, minimal loans if possible. And of course, that depends on family situations. We'll go over that towards the end of the presentation. And a social fit. We meet with so many students that when we talk to them about forming their list, they're just really hyper-focused on selectivity. They want to go to the college with the lowest acceptance rate. That's a super arbitrary goal and doesn't make sense as a strategy, right? We want students to be thinking about what place would make them happy. And we sort of think about that in these sort of 3 buckets. So just some basic terms. What is a GPA? It's a mathematical average, right? You take all of your grades and you divide it by the number of grades entered for that semester. If you take AP courses here, those will be weighted 10% extra. So a 90 in that class will be weighted as a 99, right? And that's because it's significantly more challenging. You might find during your research that colleges report GPA on a 4.0 scale. So what does that look like? Approximately this. You can also find conversion tables online that'll give you similar information, but all New York City schools report GPA on a 100-point scale, so that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. Okay, so can everybody flip to first page of their packet? So past the agenda and the note page, and this one is oriented landscape. You should have a CUNY admission profile for 2019. Now when your students apply to college, they're going to be looking at 3 years from now, and it's going to be quite different, right? It's going to have different data in it. But just to sort of start showing you and going through these numbers together, what kind of GPA is Brooklyn College looking for? What's their average incoming GPA? Does anyone find it on their admission profile? For Brooklyn College? Anyone want to take a stab at it? Yeah, so on this one's from 2018, so this is a 88.2. That's my bad for not updating the screenshot. On your one, it's 89.3. So what does that mean year over year? It got slightly higher, right? From 2018 to 2019. And you'll see the mean average SAT score admitted there as well. If you look down at the average incoming GPA for BMCC in 2018, it was a 76. Last year it was a 77.2. So again, this is what we're talking about with students. We're saying, keep in mind you want to have a 4-year college-ready GPA as much as possible, and just have realistic expectations about that. There's a huge, wide variety of undergraduate programs offered in the CUNY system. City College has its own Grove School of Engineering, a special school of architecture. Baruch is really focused on business programs, right? These are all schools in the 5 boroughs that students can start visiting, touring, just doing walkthroughs of campus, just to start getting a sense of what the local college landscape is like. So let's flip to the back. Your next page should be on the back of that one, the SUNY admissions profile. This one has a lot more data displayed on the page. Actually, here we can sort of compare last year's versus this year's admission stats for Binghamton. So what is the mean? This one is reported as a 25th to 75th percentile range for Binghamton. What is that range that Binghamton's looking for 2019? Anybody find it? Don't be shy now.
93 to 98.
Yes. So this past year it was 93 to 98. Previous year was 92 to 98, right? So we see a little bit of movement, but not huge change. And actually it looks like the average SAT scores were almost identical from year to year. What kind of GPA is SUNY Purchase looking for? You have to keep going down the line. Yes, precisely. And that was actually the same as it was last year. One of the things folks are going to notice about Potsdam and Purchase is that they're totally test optional. They do not need SAT or ACT scores for admission at all. And actually there's tons of private schools that have similar policies. A lot of students here that we talk to are very focused on Binghamton, Buffalo, and Stony Brook. We get triple-digit applications to those schools every year. I want students and parents to realize there's a lot more than just those 3 campuses, right? So some of the best fine arts programming, one of the best film schools is at SUNY Purchase, which is in White Plains. It's super close to here, it's super affordable. One of the best conservatories of music in the country is at the Crane School of Music at Potsdam. So it would be to your benefit to explore other SUNY options beyond just the 3 names that you hear the most frequently. Also, just because they're sort of listed towards the top of the profile does not mean they're the best institutions with the best graduation rates or anything like that. They're just sort of organized by types of degrees they offer, and you'll see these ones offer doctoral degrees, right? So that doesn't necessarily mean these are categorically better than these in the middle. They're just sort of organized by institution type. And by the way, there's a SUNY Welcome Center on 42nd Street. They're offering 2 info sessions this fall, one in November, one in December, called Which SUNY Are You? 9th grade parents and families are welcome to attend. If that seems premature to you, you can absolutely go 10th, 11th grade, that's fine also. But basically it's admissions reps from those SUNYs explaining to you what their different campuses have to offer, which by itself is an educational experience. So definitely check that out. So, in terms of GPA goal setting, once we talk about the super crazy selective institutions up here, we're seeing really high GPAs and test scores, right? That being said, we don't want students to exclusively focus on this for the following reason. Columbia, the average incoming GPA and SAT score last year was a 99 to 1530, but they still rejected about 95% of the candidates. So we don't want a student driving themselves crazy, making themselves sick with anxiety, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, and then only applying to institutions like this, right, with single-digit acceptance rates. That a student with a 99 to 1530 could absolutely apply to Columbia, but they should also be applying to a wide range of schools where they're extremely likely to get in, potentially be getting merit aid and other forms of financial aid. We just don't want students putting on blinders and hyper-focusing on these really crazy selective institutions. So how do you improve your GPA? It goes up every time you get a grade higher, and it goes down every time you get a grade lower. Just quick note, PE and art are graded. There are some high schools that do PE pass-fail or might do some elective classes pass-fail. Here they're graded courses, and they do factor into your GPA, so something to think about. Okay. So colleges definitely care about extracurricular activities. And actually, if we look in our packet, let's go, we're gonna skip the summer programs sheet and go right to the club list, okay? The updated club list with room numbers and meeting times will be posted on the website. We just had the club fair last week, which some 9th graders attended. You can just see the list of clubs at this school is absolutely massive. You're also allowed to start your own clubs and really encouraged to start your own clubs. That might be something you want to think about in 10th or 11th grade. One of the advantages of being at such a big school is that some of these clubs have amazing turnout, right? So I was going to the GSA like twice a month in the spring, and every single GSA Bay Straight Alliance meeting, there were over 30 students in attendance. Just excellent turnout for these clubs because it's such a big school. So you're not starved for choice, right? You have tons of different options. That being said, if you don't want to get involved with extracurriculars here at Brooklyn Tech, that is fine, but you need to start getting engaged then outside of the school community, right? So an extracurricular doesn't have to be here internal at this high school to count as an extracurricular activity. It's absolutely fine and encouraged to get involved with outside organizations and activities. here's the thing to keep in mind too. If you're the type of person that's like, clubs are corny, I'm not into that, I'm not gonna play school sports. College is all as part of your admissions file. Get Brooklyn Tech's profile. If you haven't seen it, you can Google BTHS School Profile 2018. It's gonna be a PDF document, it's available on the website. All the different clubs and sports here at Tech are listed on there, which means when the college sees this and sees no extracurriculars for 9th, 10th, 11th, or 12th, they're gonna wonder what happened here. This isn't a student that went to a rural high school with 10 students in their grade that really didn't have access. They're gonna say, what is going on? Why wasn't this student more engaged? You can't really get around it, if that makes any sense. I also skipped over this one. Student athletics are great to be involved in as well for obviously health and wellness reasons, in addition to just meeting people, getting outside, and staying engaged at school. And again, because this is such a giant school, there's a huge variety of student athletics available. You don't have to participate in a super competitive, like varsity level of engagement. Okay. So, and just to sort of reiterate this point, I just grabbed a quote from the Dean of Enrollment at Wesleyan, basically where they're saying, at selective institutions where the majority of candidates have the curriculum rigor, the preparation, the GPA and test scores to be admitted, we want to see even more from the applicant to get them, so we can distinguish them from each other in terms of activities, leadership, teacher letters of recommendation, so on and so forth. So now everybody in this room now has access to Scattergrams at Brooklyn Tech. And these can be intimidating or reassuring depending on the institution you're looking at, but they're reality, so they're worth exploring. Basically, this is a visual way of showing the students previous Brooklyn Tech applicants from the 2014 to 2019 years who was admitted, they're in green, who was declined in red, and who was waitlisted, typically shown in blue. Sometimes a waitlist or a deferment will show up as like an orange mark, at different institutions. So this one is Princeton's, which is why it looks really, really scary. But this is also why we pull it up when we talk to kids who have Princeton on their list, because a lot of our students with Princeton on their list also have a lot of other institutions like that have single-digit acceptance rates, and we're like, you need to diversify your list. This institution is crazy, crazy, crazy selective. Just to zoom in on this, so the blue lines will show you when you're looking at Scattergrams, if you want to, average accepted GPA and average accepted SAT score. Keep in mind that's over a 5-year spread, so trends may have changed for that institution over time. But zooming in on this, what you can see is that the greens are sort of peppered all over the place. We don't see just this clear correlation on the top right of green, and then as we get bottom and to the left, just pure red. It doesn't follow like that, right? If it was purely a numbers game, it would be green in the corner, a little band of blue for waitlist, and then a sea of red, but it's not, right? So this is evidence that colleges do care about more than GPA and test scores. So we don't want students hyper-focusing on that at the expense of other parts of their application, right? So in terms of planting the seed early about teacher letters of rec, if you want to know, like, what do colleges want to know about me? Why are they asking about teacher letters of recommendation? These are the things they're asking your teachers about. You get to pick those two people junior year, so you don't have to stress out about this now. But one thing you could think about as a 9th grader, and just because that font was super tiny, these are the qualities. Which of these things are your strengths? And which of these things are things you need to work on, potentially? Let me use the example of productive class discussion. Some students in the room might not participate if it's not graded. They might be like, why would I? It's not getting graded. Why would I talk in class? I'm not going to do that, right? But if the teacher's asked to comment on your participation in class, that might be something you might want to start working on. And if it's something you're not super comfortable with, you could start practicing in 9th grade when it's still kind of low stakes, right? Because you have years to sort of get this under your belt. You'll also see a lot of these things are not exclusively about academics, right? If we think about what's communicated, let me jump back to this in a minute. in different parts of your application. Your transcript and your test scores arguably are going to demonstrate your academic achievement, intellectual promise, probably your work habits, probably the quality of your writing, right? Because if we see a student with really strong grades and really strong SAT scores, these are probably the things that we expect them to be good at. Your outside of school activities, your teacher recs, all that kind of stuff can speak to those other qualities that don't show up in a transcript or a test score. They can't be measured in a transcript or a test score. Those things are maturity, motivation, leadership, right? Self-confidence, initiative and independence. And really, I don't want to make it seem like it's just about getting involved with an activity. Instead of being involved in like 8 different clubs, you could be really, really in-depth involved in one and start pursuing a leadership role in that one activity. And again, it doesn't have to be out of this high school. It could be in an external organization. That's totally fine. So let's think about what else colleges do care about, because even though I'm saying don't stress out about your test scores, we know that colleges look at them with the exception of test optional institutions. So colleges do look at your Regents exams, again, to be on track for that advanced Regents. Aim for 90 plus on your Regents exams. Don't beat yourself up if you don't hit that 90 benchmark. Really, you're aiming for 75 and up if you're thinking about CUNY 4-year college readiness in terms of avoiding like remedial coursework. But you know, for most students, we would recommend aiming for 90 plus on your Regents exams. In terms of SAT scores, you guys know there's a weird schedule tomorrow because of PSAT day. You guys will take the PSAT during the spring of your sophomore year, so a full year and a half from now. You have time. You don't need to be stressing about this. You'll have the chance to take the PSAT again that following fall. Okay, so you'll have 2 full-length practice administrations. After that point, you'll have a free SAT attempt offered here at Brooklyn Tech, regardless of household income. It'll be offered for free as long as the mayor and the city continue with that initiative. Furthermore, if you're eligible for free or reduced price lunch, we give out fee waivers, so you can take 2 more free SAT exams. If not, you can pay for Saturday administrations. I think most folks here would encourage students not to sit for an official SAT until probably fall of junior year, just because probably there's still some fundamental math skills that might be appearing on that test that you haven't covered, just because it wouldn't traditionally be covered in a 10th grade curriculum. And also just to give yourself some time, right? Don't rush things. The other thing too, we have some students, for instance, senior year, that are like, I'm gonna take the SAT a 4th time. I still want to improve my score. At that point, let's tailor the list around your existing score, right? Your SAT score is not 100% predictive of how you're gonna perform in college. So instead of hyper-focusing on moving it 10 points, 20 points, whatever, let's make a really logical, balanced list around the score you get. Another thing that I just want to mention, because we're in New York City, so the SAT and the PSAT are, you know, the big thing here. We encourage our juniors also to sit for the ACT at least once, just to see if they do better. Some people perform better on that style of test. They're very different tests, but they cover similar concepts. So if you sit for both and you do significantly better in the ACT, that's the one that you're going to authorize to send out, and nobody needs to see your SAT score. One thing for parents in the room, or students in the room that are oldest in the household, what we once thought in terms of sending out test scores is a little different now. Students are allowed to pick which test administrations go out. So, you know, including upwards of 10 years ago, all SAT scores would be sent out to colleges, right? So oftentimes students were discouraged from taking it even twice. 3 times was like a big no-no because every single administration was going out. Things are different now. Students are actually allowed to pick which administration goes out. So it's actually to their benefit to sit for it twice, just to see if they perform better on one than another. So can we flip back to 1 page before the club list? The top of this will say sample summer programs open to 9th graders. So there's 2 big reasons to participate in pre-college summer programming. One is that, actually I'm going to reverse the order of the bullet points in the slide because I think the second bullet is way more important. It can help you determine what you want. We meet with so many students with excellent test scores, excellent GPAs that really don't know what they're looking for. They don't know what campus size they want, what class size they want, what culture they want on campus, and they're really just feeling like they're in the dark on all this stuff, right? Even doing a 1 week long pre-college program can really shed light on what kind of campus you're looking for, right? And what'll make you happy and feel successful. The other secondary important thing is that it can strengthen your college application, right? The Common App has a totally separate section under the Education tab for you to report college level coursework aside from AP or IB classes. So obviously it's to your advantage if Common App thinks this is important information to know, and chances are, if a student has participated in a summer program and been really successful, that's kind of a taste and a preview, right, of how they're going to be at the college level. In terms of free and low cost programs, all the CUNYs have summer College Now programs. We also have College Now partnerships here at Tech. Our partners are Hunter College and New York City College of Technology. If you just look up BTHS College Now, you can see our website, sort of maintained by our College Now coordinator. Once this PowerPoint is on the website, you can also just click on the hyperlink and it'll take you there. But there's an amazing diversity of options available, right? So Brooklyn College has a marine biology intensive for 6 weeks. It's free, it's college credit bearing. Like, what an amazing opportunity for a student that wants to pursue something like that. SUNY Purchase and SUNY FIT have programming available for all grade levels, 9 through 12. So just some course titles that were on offer last year. Purchase had 3D game design. They had an architecture intensive, they had acting intensive. FIT has a lot of classes around fine arts, but also some around business. The SUNY ones aren't free, but for an entire week of classes that are college credit bearing and meet about 6.5 hours per day is $270, which for parents in the room that have paid for summer camps or summer intensive, it's way cheaper than a lot of organized summer activities. Definitely worth checking out, right? And FIT is right here in Chelsea, in Manhattan, and Purchase is in White Plains. So these are just a sample of a couple of ones that are on offer. Right below that on your handout, you're going to see some private institutions that have summer pre-college programs. And I just grabbed some. This is not an exhaustive list. And I just put a sample course title for the school and indicated for you on that last column whether financial aid was available, right? So for instance, Brown University has pre-college programs. You can apply for scholarships in November or December-ish. If you get selected, you can go to that program, usually for free if you win the scholarship to attend that program. See, Carnegie Mellon offers a pre-college institute. Columbia has a sports business class. Obviously, these ones that are outside the city, it's expected that students are going to be living on campus, right? So if that feels premature between 9th and 10th grade, could be something to start researching between 10th and 11th. Also, let's say you don't think you're going to be eligible for a need-based scholarship to attend one of these programs. It's a lot cheaper to invest in a 2-week college intensive at one of these expensive institutions if you're paying full price than it is to pay for an entire year of tuition, fees, room, and board. So even if the price tag of the summer program is looking a little off-putting, if you're not eligible for financial aid, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, I would think about it as a preview before you're committing to that institution the full price of a year of attendance. So again, on your sheet, you have a list of which ones offer scholarships to students, right? To cover the cost of those programs. Another really important thing, and a thing you have control over as a 9th grade student, 9th grade parent and family, we would love for more students to visit local colleges. We meet so many students that have never done an official tour info session at NYU or at Tandon. never visited Barnard or Columbia, never visited any of the local CUNYs, never visited Fordham, not in Manhattan, not in the Bronx. You have so many institutions right here in the 5 boroughs. And even if you're really confident you don't want to go to school in New York City, it can be helpful to see things you don't like to get insight into what you like, right? And clarify that preference. If I have a student that tells me, I visited Fordham at Lincoln Center, I visited NYU, and I felt like NYU downtown was way too big, even if the student doesn't want to apply to either, that's going to help me, the student's guidance counselor, and other people suggest other institutions, right, based on those sort of emerging preferences. These colleges want you to visit. You are not putting upon these schools to visit, right? They have whole offices and teams dedicated to coordinating visits. Visits are free. You should sign up online because you want those visits to be tracked and you want them to be official through their admissions office. But I just can't encourage students enough to do tours and info sessions locally for free, just to start building their awareness and building sort of a profile of what college they're looking for. So now we're going to jump into Naviance and some of the suggested applications that we have for you as 9th grade students and families. So this is the login you're going to want to use if you haven't logged in yet. I know I sent like a welcome message maybe 2 weeks ago or something like that. If you didn't check it, it was student.naviance.com/BrooklynTech. Okay. Your default username is your BTHS email, and your default password is your OSIS number. If you're trying to log in and it doesn't work, and you have a hyphenated last name, or something like that, my email will be at the end of this presentation. Just reach out to me. If you already changed your password and you can't remember it, you can always reset it. As long as you have access to your BTHS email, you're gonna be in good shape, okay? So here's one of the first tools that we think would be valuable for students. It only takes about 10 minutes. So when students, one other thing I should have mentioned, Brooklyn Tech uses Naviance to send out all college documents. Naviance is really like, the hub of the workflow. It's where all college-related stuff gets processed during junior and senior year. So the more students get used to it, 9th and 10th and 11th grade, exploring the website, getting comfortable with it, the better your outcome, right? Your comfort level with that technology. So when you log in, on the top right, you're gonna click About Me, then My Assessments. You can then use a career cluster finder to match with 3 career clusters. These are super simple questions. They're yes or no questions. It's like, I like being with other people. I like being by myself. I like listening to music. I like being outside. They're really straightforward questions. I promise you, put on headphones, you'll be done in about 8 to 10 minutes, I'd say max, okay? You're then gonna match with 3 career clusters. So things that students matched with last year might be graphic design or health professions, right? These things might help you understand what major you want to pick here at Brooklyn Tech's sophomore year. The other nice thing about this is that your results are going to be saved, so your guidance counselor and college counselor and teacher recommenders, in theory, can sort of see the results of that assessment and just get a better sense of what you're looking for sort of in your college. You can also look up for given careers potential salaries. You can filter by colleges that have that major. So if you match with graphic design, you can see the average salary of a graphic designer in New York City, and then populate your list with schools that maybe offer it. We're briefly going to talk about how to use Supermatch, which is a college search tool on Naviance. By the way, that assessment you can keep redoing. So don't be paranoid about doing it in 9th grade because you're going to be a very different person in 2 years. You can always retake it and get different results. So to use this, you're going to select colleges, then find your fit, then Supermatch. What you can do here is you can filter. I think there's about 4,000, 5,000 schools in here by location. A lot of our students are interested in dorming, but want to be within 6 hours of a city. So the first thing we're going to put in here is maybe a range of miles from their home zip code, or maybe just check off Mid-Atlantic and Northeast. They can also, if you look on the bottom right there, they can select if they want to be in a city, be nearby a city, or be totally away from a city. It's also okay if you don't have preferences around these things at this stage. You can also filter by major type and start getting a sense of what places offer what you want. I met with a senior today who had an excellent GPA, excellent test scores, wanted to do game design, and half the schools on his list didn't have game design. So we sat there and looked at this tool together and reformulated that list to make sure that he's able to pursue what he's excited about, right? So not all schools offer all things, so you can use this to start filtering with your parameters. You can also filter by diversity metrics. You can filter to just see HBCUs or LGBTQ inclusive institutions, or specify certain gender ratios that you're comfortable with on campus or percentages of international students. You can use all of these tools to start refining your list. And this is going to segue us into talking about financial aid briefly. You can also use the cost tab to set a maximum amount per year of total costs. I would only do that if your household was not planning to apply for financial aid. So for parents in the room that are like, I'm paying full price, I know we're not going to qualify for financial aid, I want to filter right now by just schools that are under $50,000 per year. So that's going to include my CUNYs, my SUNYs, some out-of-state publics perhaps. That could be a helpful search parameter. For students that want to apply for financial aid, what we would recommend you do instead of setting a maximum cost is check this off. Meets 100% of demonstrated need. There's only about 55 institutions in the United States that promise to meet 100% of demonstrated need. And I'm going to sort of go in depth into that in a moment to explain to you what that means. But in short, it means the college has a really generous need-based financial aid policy. And if household income and assets are under a certain amount, you could potentially get a full ride, right, from that institution. So again, recommending folks only use the total cost parameter if you're planning on paying full price. And if you're planning on aiming for a lot of need-based aid, use that bottom check-off box to filter there. If you click on an institution, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see their graduation rate. You're going to see their acceptance rate. That's a national, not a local number. You're also going to see an average net price, but it's not terribly accurate, and we'll show you how to more accurately predict those numbers in just a moment with one of your handouts. So then students can click on admissions to look at local Brooklyn Tech acceptance rates. This is super important because for you, you want to see, is this an institution that's kind of overrepresented or oversaturated at Brooklyn Tech? Or is this a school that a lot of students don't know about, so I actually would have a slightly higher chance of getting in? So what I'm going to ask you to do now is turn to the page in your packet that says most commonly applied to colleges and universities at Brooklyn Tech. So it's going to be about 3 little bits of text and then a table underneath. These have sort of been grouped by either location or institution characteristics. So these top 6 schools are highly ranked colleges in the Boston area. If you look at the national acceptance rate for Tufts in 2018 versus the Brooklyn Tech acceptance rate, you're going to notice this is a hyper-selective institution at this high school, right? There's a lower local acceptance rate. If we contrast that for that year with Brandeis, you'll see their national acceptance rate is 34, their local is 45. So actually, it was slightly higher on the local level, right? That doesn't mean just exclusively base your list on this information, but be aware of it, right? Tufts is certainly, if you look on the national level, a way more selective institution, but it's not 5 times more selective, right? Which is what we see in the local acceptance rate, right? So that could be beneficial in terms of being strategic with your list and your exploration of colleges. If you flip that page on the back, I want to draw your attention to WPI, about halfway down the page. National acceptance rate of 48, local of 35. It's a little harder to get into on the local level. Versus RIT, which is a 57% national acceptance rate, 71 from Brooklyn Tech. And then if you look at Columbia, their national acceptance rate that year was 6, their local was 2. If you look at Fordham, it was 46 nationally, 61 locally. So what does that tell us? People are disproportionately applying to certain institutions, right? And sometimes that works in your favor, and sometimes that doesn't work in your favor. You have access to all this information on Naviance now, right? This is not publicly released information, so you have this at your fingertips, right? We would never encourage any student, no matter how high their GPA or SAT score, to be exclusively applying to schools with single-digit acceptance rates, right? Because that's a recipe for being disappointed. All right, so now we're going to transition into talking about financial aid, and this is about the last 15 minutes of the presentation, so just to give you a little time. All right. So we're going to talk about two key terms. For students in the room, this is going to sound really early to be hearing these terms. For parents in the room, I think it's a good time to be considering this, if you haven't before. So when you hear the term merit-based aid, that's based on things other than family finances, right? Things that might be included might be grades, test scores, extracurriculars, other things, just other than family income and assets. When we use that term need-based aid, we are exclusively talking about family income and assets. Here's why this is important. We meet with a lot of students as seniors. When we talk to them and we say, hey, it's interesting, all of your schools on your list offer exclusively need-based aid. Are you eligible for a lot of need-based aid? If it's the first time they're hearing that phrase, they're like, what, right? We would probably recommend strategizing your list financially depending on which form of aid you're looking for. For instance, let me show you with an EFC table. Actually, no, that's too specific. If when you file your FAFSA, if you're not eligible for free or reduced price lunch, if you have relatively high income, let's say for a household size of 4, you make $150,000 per year, your ability to contribute to the child's cost of education might be kind of limited, right? But according to the federal government or the school's formula, they might be expecting a really hefty contribution. That would be a case where we would not necessarily recommend the student exclusively focused on need-based aid schools. So for instance, we had a senior last year who got into Cornell who was expected to pay $54,000 per year. And she was really upset, how am I gonna do this? When we looked at her FAFSA, her EFC was $54,000 per year. We had to explain to her, spring of senior year, Cornell doesn't offer merit aid. It's exclusively based on your household income and assets. So if you had let us know that that was a priority for you, qualifying for merit-based aid, we would have asked you to include more schools on your list that do offer merit aid, right? No Ivy League school offers merit aid. All Ivy League schools offer exclusively need-based aid. Meaning my child's not getting any special consideration outside of family income and assets. Here's another nice thing for parents now that wasn't accessible, I want to say even upwards of like 5 years ago, but certainly not 10 years ago and beyond. You can get a preview of your EFC now. You don't have to wait till end of junior year. Now keep in mind, of course, this is information that's going to change over the next couple of years, so it's just going to be a ballpark estimate. But a lot of people fill out FAFSA forecasters or EFC calculators and they're actually really surprised at the number that comes out, right? Either positively surprised or negatively surprised, okay? Your EFC is the amount of money that the federal government expects the family to contribute, right? So it could be as low as 0, meaning this family can't contribute, meaning the student needs to be focusing on colleges with amazing need-based aid policies, or it could be super high, like $100,000 per year, $50,000 per year, and the family's like, we cannot do that, in which case they need to be focusing on schools with merit-based aid, or at least including several of them. So as I showed you before, you can filter which ones offer 100% of demonstrated need. You can also Google it and find sort of running lists of colleges online. We'll look at a resource that I've included in your packet today. Colleges also now have to provide net price calculators to shoppers, to future students, which means if you have a college in mind, or if you're just curious about your own alma mater or a college that you've heard of that you think would be a good place, either student or parent, look up name of the school, net price calculator, and fill in the information. It should only take about 15 minutes. So I just filled out one for Vassar with a student, and this was the report. Household contribution was about $19,000 per year, right? For that student, they then had to go home and say, hey parent, does this sound reasonable, or does this sound like not a good fit, right? And instead of doing that senior year, students can start on that way earlier, or if parents feel comfortable starting that research process, it would be a good idea to get the ball rolling on that now. Just so you can get a ballpark sense of federal formulas for EFCs. Household making $75,000 per year, 2 dependent children, EFC is $9,000 per year. To me, seeing that, living in New York City, that's crazy. How could anyone making $75,000 a year with 2 kids in New York City afford $9,000 per year, right? It just doesn't feel realistic. So that's why I would encourage folks to do this now, so that if there's a gap between this and what feels realistic, you can start amassing those savings now, right? Start a 529 if you haven't, start increasing amount going into a savings account, for instance, to try and bridge that gap between what the federal government or the institution might be wanting from you and what feels manageable. Another thing to mention, I should have mentioned this. This does not take into account home equity, okay? So the FAFSA doesn't count the home that you live in as like an investment. Some private colleges do, which is why you're going to want to do net price calculators for those institutions. For CUNYs and SUNYs, this is going to be the way of assessing that, because they don't care about home ownership. Those private schools, all those really selective ones we've been talking about thus far, they do, and it moves the needle in terms of the EFC, right? So it's not just income, it's also assets. If you don't have a 529, just real quick plug for that, the money grows tax deferred. Withdrawals are tax-free for qualified expenses, those being the ones on the left. Things I didn't know before researching New York's 529, up to $5,000 state income tax deductible for single filers, $10,000 for married filers. Anybody can contribute, so it's a safe way to have different folks helping out with college funding. And if you don't use it for the intended beneficiary, it's really easy to change who the beneficiary is. So sometimes people don't want to do a 529 because they're worried, oh my God, what if my student doesn't want to go? Or what if they want to take a gap year? You can transfer it to somebody else. If you have multiple children, chances are somebody's going to use it. It can be used for undergrad, it can be used for grad school, it can be used on parents, if parents want to do continuing education. So if you're pretty confident that someone in that household is going to be pursuing some form of higher education, it's a very good idea. Other savings options just to consider would be, high yield, high APY savings accounts, right? Which you can shop around for different rates. Sometimes parents, also maybe accountants sometimes spread this myth, oh, don't save up money because then colleges are going to ask for it for financial aid purposes. They don't necessarily expect you to liquidate all these assets, right? It's better to save and have the money available should you need it than to just hope that the college gives you the money that you want, right? And if right now you can actually accurately predict what your EFC is, you can put the wheels in motion to start sort of preparing for that. Okay, so just to sort of preview some costs. CUNY colleges are on your left. SUNY colleges are on the right. What you're going to notice is that there's not a huge difference between tuition and fees. Well, the SUNY's add a couple $1,000s of fees. The big difference is room and board, right? So you're dorming for the entire year. Usually they make you participate in a meal plan where you have like excess amount of meals, and you're like, I cannot eat this campus food anymore, right? We do see a big price difference here, right? By the way, these price tags are without financial aid. Let's look at an out-of-state public school. This is tuition and fees for Penn State. Room and board, total estimated direct cost. Tuition fees, room and board for an extremely selective private institution, again without financial aid. So these can be really, really surprising, but let's just calculate an estimated family contribution for 3 types of institutions if the EFC was 0, if household income was pretty low and assets were pretty low. So what you're going to see, Hunter might be a net cost of 0 because of federal and state aid usually. Binghamton might be a net cost of about $7,000 based on different forms of federal and state aid. But Lehigh University in Pennsylvania, which has a super generous financial aid policy, might actually be cheaper, even though the ticket price the full price, would not make us necessarily think that that's the case. Let's look at another example. So this is a household of 4 making $80,000 a year with an EFC of about $10,000 a year. You're gonna see is that kid's probably gonna be paying close to full price for Hunter, less with the Excelsior scholarship, which you don't need to worry about now, close to full price for Binghamton, slightly less with Excelsior, but again, a hefty price tag. And then at Haverford, actually, the net price is half of what it is for Binghamton. So just to give you that sense of, sometimes private schools can be less expensive than the public institution, but it's all about being strategic with that private school choice, right? Lehigh and Haverford have really generous need-based aid policies for a kid wanting merit aid. They very well might not offer any whatsoever, okay? And that's sort of summarized here, right? So example being, let's pretend I got into NYU and Barnard. They have different financial aid policies, which might mean they want totally different family contributions. So a lot of students and parents aren't aware of this. You could apply to 12 schools, get accepted to 6, and have 6 very different financial aid packages, which is again why we oftentimes encourage students to really weigh this stuff heavily and make their list financially balanced, in addition to balanced in terms of just pure admissions. If you guys look at the last page of your packet, this is a list of schools with really generous financial aid policies. When I say that, I mean need-based aid policies. Several of these have committed to eliminating student loans from the financial aid package, which is even better than just meeting 100% of demonstrated need, because now it's 100% of demonstrated need and not expecting students to borrow. Some of these are crazy selective institutions, like Columbia has a 2% acceptance rate, but Oberlin is on this list and they have a 50% acceptance rate from Brooklyn Tech, right? University of Pennsylvania has a 2% acceptance rate. Vassar last year took about 25% of applicants, right? So just to show you, a lot of these schools on here are crazy, crazy selective single-digit acceptance rate schools. There's a lot of schools on here that maybe you're not as familiar with that might also offer really, really excellent financial aid and be really worth a good look. Okay, so just to summarize, we're encouraging students to aim, let's just say for 90 plus GPA. Again, we don't want you like growing gray hairs and getting crazy stressed and anxious because of this. We want you just performing your best. And ultimately, we're going to encourage you to design a list that's compatible with your GPA and test scores. Pass every single class, because as we said before, being behind on a credit could delay your graduation. We had tons of students that became August graduates because they were missing a singular class. So students need to be aware of that. Get involved in extracurriculars. Sign up for summer enrichment opportunities if possible. Please, please, please visit local colleges. Even if you have no idea what you want to do, just the experience of a tour, an info session, and peeking into college classes is going to give you a better sense of what you're looking for. Some of your colleges might have class sizes of 12, and some colleges you look at might have lectures of 700. Right? That is going to be a really eye-opening experience. You don't even know what you want to major in to know how you feel walking into that environment, okay? And please use Naviance tools. Use the Career Cluster Finder. You can always redo it. It's not set in stone. Use the Supermatch tool. Add to colleges you're thinking about, because then your guidance counselors, your college counselors will know as well. Absolutely use external resources too. Don't exclusively use Naviance, but the good thing about Naviance is that your progress is going to be saved. 9th grade work will roll over into 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, and it's really just going to give you so much more preparation for what you're going to encounter junior year. In terms of parents, how can you help? How can you be of assistance in such a stressful process? Review student marking period grades, semester grades. Assist students in looking for summer opportunities. Try to visit local schools with your child. Encourage them to ask questions or talk about practice questions in advance. Budget for college, so start saving now so that you're not experiencing that sticker shock later. And also I would tag onto this, be honest, be transparent. Let students know, hey listen, this is how much we can contribute, because then they can strategically plan around it, right? There's no like terrible or unacceptable response. If a student lets us know, I need all the need-based aid, my family cannot contribute, or the student says, my family can really realistically contribute about $22,000 a year, that's gonna help us strategize with that student, right? And not being super transparent about that can actually be like counterproductive. Consider buying other resources. In the office, we like to use rugs, Princeton Review, Colleges That Change Lives. All these are great print resources that you can use to have conversations with your student. And then of course, use Naviance. What I was planning on doing tonight was taking the emails that parents used on the RSVP forms and just doing a data upload and giving you separate logins to Naviance. You can't do all the same things that your student can do. You can't complete assessments, you can't add colleges, you can't do all of the functions, but it'll give you sort of a back office view of what the platform looks like, okay? Thank you so much for coming. I think I kept it to exactly 1 hour. So we're gonna take about 20 minutes of questions and answers in the